Welcome to the Greenstone presentations of 2020. The Greenstone presentations are actually a year-long journey in which the students find purpose and project to drive them along. But the truth is, the Greenstone presentations will not just show you a year's journey, but will show you a unique insight into our wonderful seniors. It will show you part of their character, their passions and their drive. This isn't just their capstone project of their high school, it's the capstone of their whole school experience. So sit back, relax and enjoy these wonderful journeys and support our seniors in their final march towards graduation.
$80 metric tons, 23%, 0.134 seconds. In 2019, Green School prevented 80 metric tons of CO2 from entering the atmosphere from renewable energy alone. That's equivalent to over 10 million charges of a single smartphone. Only 23% of that renewable energy is from solar power. And if you wrapped a wire around the entire Earth, electricity would travel through it and all the way back to you in just 0.134 seconds. These facts have stuck with me and have inspired me to learn more about renewable energy. Phase 5 is the 5th phase in the Auris project. To give you a little insight into what that means and how you too will be inspired by it, I'd like to tell you all a story. My story. My Greenstone began the second I walked into class that first day of school. I didn't know it at the time, but this bamboo cathedral was going to be my home for the next 4 years. To be honest, I had no idea what I was going to be saying up here today. I simply followed my passion, I did what I loved, I encountered influential people, and I said yes to every single one of the opportunities that came my way. This is my Greenstone journey. It's no surprise that architecture and sustainable design became my passion. As growing up, all I ever wanted to do was build and create, whether that was with Lego inside on rainy days, or building dams from the river to the ocean near my home in Hong Kong. And like most kids, I would spend hours and hours building dens and tree houses, and constantly thinking of new ways to build them better and stronger. That first year at Green School, I opened myself up to the freedom of the curriculum, and I quickly realized that I could create my own unique learning pathway. Green School offered me the opportunity to develop those childhood interests into something much more real and tangible. I love designing and getting my hands dirty, so the green building classes were always my first choice when the next set of choices rolled around. Grade 9 was the year that I started working with the Auris project, Operation Rain or Shine. I got more involved with the team and the message of the project. Operation Rain or Shine is aimed at creating a system of renewable energy, providing clean electricity in both the rainy season and the sunny season, using both hydropower and solar power. The team was led by experienced educators, Pak Jason and Pak Noan, who both became big influences along my journey. Grade 9 was also the year that I started to take classes with Mikkel, another student who had been there from the beginning of the Auris project and let me in on all the details of the first phase. This is the Auris Dome. We built it in phase 2, but you might know it as the igloo or the white dome. What you might not know, however, is that almost every single student and teacher on campus played a big part in the construction of this building, whether it was ferrying wheelbarrows of soil across the field or filling rice bags with dirt. Now, let me tell you, the PE team were not so happy about this part. The field was destroyed, but it became a whole school project that a lot of students would remember for a long time. It's just like Pak Noan said. It's easy to tell a child, here's what a solar panel does. But if they build part of a wall that is now housing a solar array, they are going to feel so much more invested into it. That is entirely true. It's had a massive effect on me, being part of the construction stages. In grade 10, I gained fundamental construction and designing skills, as well as a fairly basic knowledge of electricity. The project had moved on from earthbag construction to designing and building a bamboo roof. This was now phase 3. Getting deeper involved in the project led to an exceptional opportunity. Mikkel, Pak Noan, and I were invited to travel to Abu Dhabi to represent Green School at the Zayed Sustainability Prize. And while there, we interacted with other schools and energy companies that were taking part in the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. We presented our stories and experiences of the Auris project. And we encouraged the idea that climate action does not need to start big. Anyone can start their own initiatives or projects that can have a positive impact on the world. Sharing a stage with Mikkel, telling the Auris story to hundreds of other students. What a way to spend my 16th birthday. The main theme of that event was the butterfly effect. Imagine a butterfly flaps its wings in Bali, and a hurricane is caused in Bermuda. It's the idea that one small action can create big changes. Now, I'd like you to keep that in mind throughout the rest of my talk. Grade 11 was the year that I started to look to the future. I said yes to every single one of the opportunities that came my way, and I worked hard. I represented Green School at the IMF conference. That's the Global Banking Organization, not the spy agency for Mission Impossible. Whilst there, I was offered an internship at a bank in Amsterdam. I grabbed this opportunity. But after spending a month there, I realized that banking wasn't the world for me. And when I arrived back in Bali, I jumped straight back into the green building classes that I know and love. In that third year, I had become one of the more experienced students in the class, helping set up equipment, lead some of the student teams, and the safety tutorials as well. I had taken up more responsibility in the class, and I had a newfound respect for my teachers and their hands-on methods. That new perspective helped me strengthen my understanding of green building and renewable energy. After we finished working on the bamboo roof, we started construction on the water storage amphitheater. This was now phase 4. Essentially, it's a seating area, but with 17,000 liters of water hidden directly underneath. At the beginning of grade 12, I took up more of a co-teacher role in the Auris project, and I dug even deeper into the history and the complexities of renewable energy. I worked closely with Ibudita, Pak Baxter, and Pak Tony. I taught students how to use table saws, safely of course, and I guided groups of students to working with ironwood and metal. Once the amphitheater was complete, we tested the water collection and storage systems to make sure that it all came together into one large system. That marked the end of phase 4. This was now it. Phase 5 had begun. All of the main construction jobs were complete. The E-Hub Dome, the bamboo roof, and the water storage amphitheater. There was only one thing left to do. The focus was now solely on renewable energy. As part of the Auris class, we went up onto the roof of the bamboo. We went up onto the roof, and we helped install electrical wiring for the solar panels. As much as I wanted to do all of this myself, I couldn't because of safety risks. So a local contractor came in and saved the day. In just 4 months of use, those solar panels had reduced CO2 consumption by 3.7 tons. That's precisely equivalent to planting 202 trees. At that point, I realized that all of the work I had been doing with Operation Rain or Shine and the Zayed Sustainability Prize had been building up to the final stages of my involvement. it had put me in a unique situation where I had the resources and the know-how to run my very own Auris class. Ibudita, Pak Baxter, and Pak Tony had extensive experience in this project, so I reached out to them for their guidance. With their help, I ran an Auris class with 17 high school students, making it the most popular for that block. The class was originally meant to improve the efficiency of the Green School grid, while teaching students all about the complexities of renewable energy, mainly solar and hydro. However, due to certain circumstances, the class switched to online. And instead of working on campus on solar panels, the students learned at home through a set of hands-on tasks. Along with some basic research and electricity assignments, the students learned about the power of the sun through hot air balloon experiments in their own backyard. Their final project was to create a scale model of a renewable energy system made of recycled materials. Most of the students opted to create a water wheel, while some of them decided to go the digital route and created models on SketchUp. I'm not a trained teacher, so I was grateful to have Pak Baxter, Ibudita, and Pak Tony there to support the class. I tried to make the class experiential and as interesting as possible, while still allowing the students to build and create with their hands. Distance learning wasn't the best, but man, seeing those students build and create with their hands, it was such a nostalgic moment for me, and it brought me back to my childhood. I'll be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure how much they actually learned in that class, but it was definitely a good experience and a very good first attempt. Because of the work I did on the Auris project, I was asked to be a guest by the Zayed Sustainability Prize on their talk show called Find the Pioneer. It was live streamed to Facebook and was an amazing experience for me. I was joined by 2 climate change activists and an environmental entrepreneur. Holding a conversation with climate change heroes was a little nerve-wracking, not gonna lie. But do you remember the butterfly effect? How one small action can create big change. That one small act of me joining a green building class oh so many years ago had now snowballed into my voice and my message being heard by over 30,000 people. We, as a generation, as a greater community, simply aren't doing enough to encourage renewable electricity. The problem that I have begun to face on my journey as a student is the false reality of renewable electricity. Most children nowadays know more about solar panels than some adults, just like smartphones or computers. But regardless of age, not enough people truly understand how a solar panel actually works. I definitely don't know everything, but I do know the importance of learning about it at a young age. Let's bring the issue down to a more local scale. The Green School Bali campus, for example. Everyone sees the solar panels on the rooftops, and you all see the vortex spinning down by the river. But very few people actually know how they work, and even fewer understand how they work in a system. I'm willing to bet that not many of you know that when Green School is running at an average production rate, we are providing clean energy to the grid. Now, I don't want to bog you down in the details here, but with the local Indonesian laws about net metering, Green School Bali can export clean energy to the grid and then import it back when we need it. The easiest way to think about this is it's essentially renting the grid as a battery. When all of the renewable energy systems on campus are running smoothly, Green School Bali is not only sustainable, but it also pumps clean, green energy into the Bali power grid. Keep in mind that in this case, sustainable does not mean purely clean energy. At peak times in the middle of the day, when all of the iHub machines are whirring away and all of the fans are on, the vortex and the solar panels alone are not enough to meet that demand. But overnight, the vortex continues to generate a massive amount of electricity, even as all of the other electrical devices, including solar panels, have powered down for the night. Meaning, we can give to the grid more than we take from it. That is the ideal situation that we have with the renewable energy grid today. But inevitably, there are times when one or more of the systems do go offline. Looking back now, the renewable energy class that I taught would have run a lot smoother if I had a resource to help guide me along. And so, to make renewable energy more accessible to young students, I have created a course planner. I have created a learning and teaching resource that highlights all of the key learning moments, mistakes, and accomplishments that I have experienced with Operation Rain or Shine or otherwise. I have designed this course planner so that anybody can teach a renewable energy class. All they need to do is look at the basic guidelines to get started. But the key idea is to make it accessible to students and allow them to kickstart their own energy project. But don't you agree that it would be a little selfish if Green School Bali kept all of this awareness and knowledge to ourselves? My story exists here. But I think it's time to bring the sister schools into the mix. I want to help educators and students across the world get more involved with this message. So I reached out across the international arm of Green School. Both Green School New Zealand and Green School South Africa are welcoming my course planner into their curriculum and are also open to student input. If we, the youth, are going to be the generation of change, we need to start learning about renewable energy as early as possible. It's not only a pivotal moment in time for climate change activism, but also a crucial moment for a change in the ways of education. I hope to empower young people across the world to take part in something that'll give them skills for life. In the pursuit of making renewable energy accessible to young students, I have been on an incredible learning journey. I have met amazing people who have inspired me to make my own butterfly effect. I have Jason, Noan, Baxter, Tony, Mikkel, Harriet, Dita, and so many more to thank for that. Operation Rain or Shine does not end at Phase 5, but it is where I must leave it. My own story with Green School ends here.
Live, enjoy, and be grateful. That is the motto of the coconut community in my village, Sibangkaja. Coconut. If you hear the word coconut, many of you will imagine a sweet, fresh water. But coconut is more than a fresh water. Coconut is a tree with 1,000 benefits. In 1970, my village was famous from its coconut oil. And almost all of my community in my village worked as a coconut oil producer. Coconut oil has been part of my life since I was a child. When I was 7, I used coconut oil a lot. My grandmother used to make coconut oil. At that time, we ate only with rice mixed with a little bit of coconut oil and salt. Even though that sounds very simple, but the taste of that food was amazing. But right now, everything is changing very fast, especially in my village. It is very hard right now to find people who still process coconut oil. This is very confusing because if a lot of people say that my village is famous because of the coconut oil, but why are there only a few who still processing it? What makes them stop? Arikasi is the name of plant family that coconut tree belongs to. There are over 150 species of coconuts that can be found in 80 different countries throughout the world. There are over 150 species of coconuts that can be found in 80 different countries throughout the world. The coconut tree grows only in tropical climate, which is in our country, Indonesia. Coconut is one type of tree where almost every part of it has benefits, including fruit, woods, roots, and leaves. In many places, as in Indonesia, coconut trees are cultivated both in houses and plantation. And right now, coconut tree is known as tree of life because this tree can produce a variety of products derived from various parts. It can build houses, used for decoration, and even medicine. In Bali, coconut oil has been one of the products from coconut tree that had a great business potential. We use coconut oil all day, every day, from cooking, skincare, body massage, hair care, and some people, like my dad, drink coconut because it has a good health benefits. It is believed it may also boost your heart health. Now, we know the benefits. Let's go back to my first question. What happened with the coconut community in my village? Why could I only find a few who are still processing coconut oil? During the last year, when I started to learn about this community, I realized that this community had a big potential to move forward, to become bigger, but many of them were not aware of this opportunity. All of these people have been working as a coconut oil producer for around 20 to 30 years. But after 20 to 30 years of processing coconut oil, many of them have not been able to lead a prosperous life. Many of them still have difficulty to meet their daily needs. I was shocked. This is happening not only in my village, but this is also happening across Bali. I met one of the oil producers from Gianyar, Bali. He felt the same way, struggling to meet their economic needs. During those 20 to 30 years of processing coconut oil, not a lot of things have changed in their life. They were not making any money, even enough money to buy food for their family. When I first learned about this, I was so angry. Why does this happen? Why our coconut communities who have been making oil for over 20 years unable to see any improvement in their economic capacity? Why can they improve their family well-being? To answer this question, it was important to understand more about the people's experiences. And I got so many answers, and these answers were so many problems. 1. Lack of access to the large coconut supplies. I bet you didn't think I would say this, but in fact, it is hard for Balinese coconut oil producers to find enough coconuts. Of course, Bali is full of coconuts. However, many of the coconut will be sent to Java, where they will be processed into food, drink, craft, and oil. The Japanese buyer arrive and pay for the coconuts before the coconuts ready to be used for oil production. This available income means the farmer go for this option rather than waiting for the Balinese oil producers. Technology. So there are less income for the producer and less coconut. This led to the second problem, as they cannot afford to buy a new machine that help them to grade the coconut to a different quality. This led to the second problem, as they cannot afford to buy a new machine that help to grade the coconuts to a different quality than by hand. It also slower methods mean that they make less. Balinese people are not interested anymore in buying coconut oil. Many of the Balinese, especially Sibang Kaja residents, no longer have an interest in using coconut oil because the price is more expensive than other oil they find in the market. In 1980 until 1990, Coconut oil in Bali sold at price of 3,000 rupiah. But right now, 1 liter of coconut oil is 30,000 rupiah. According to 20 people around my village, they prefer to use other oils such as palm oil because the price is more cheaper than the price of virgin coconut oil. Also, over the course of a week, the quality of coconut oil changes, make it less durable than other oil. These problems all have negative impact on the coconut oil businesses, and soon all the oil producers in my village will be decreased, or maybe there will be no more coconut oil producer in my village. The question we must ask ourselves is, where do the products I buy come from? Most of us consume the products that come from outside Bali. Perhaps this is because the big shops stock these products. Perhaps this is because it is easier to access this product. Or maybe because we are not aware of the impact on Balinese coconut oil businesses. Supporting local business means that we are not only helping our local community, but this is also good for the environment. Local businesses have a smaller carbon footprint than a larger company. It is that simple. Carbon footprint is every action that releases harmful carbon such as CO2. A carbon footprint is the total amount greenhouse gas emission that come from the product, use, and the end of life of a product or service. So, if we import oil from outside Bali, we have to consider how much fuel we use, because the more fuel we use, the bigger our footprint will be. This picture helps to show us that one product can use multiple transport to arrive in your local shop. It helps us to understand and think about how large our carbon footprint is if we always import oil or other products from outside Bali. The reality is that the Balinese coconut community cannot afford the very food for their family. They cannot transform their business from bottom up. After a few months learn about this, I felt I need to take action. I need to do something. Then, I decided without any input from any people, I make an organization where I invite all the coconut oil producers in my village to join, and together we make their business bigger. I started to collect the oil from them every week and receive whatever amount of oil they were able to make. Some of those who are older only able to make 3 liters every week, but there are some who are able to make 10 liters every week. Working together means that we have a larger supply available. I sell the oil through Facebook by promoting on Facebook group of Canggu community, Ubud community, and then Pasar community. All the profit will go to the all coconut oil producer in my village. With help from the Project Hub, I got funds to buy a new machine for the coconut producer and packaging for the oil that is more environmentally friendly. If we want to reduce our carbon emission, protect our environment, and rebuild our community, we need to open our mind and connect with our local businesses. Some of our coconut oil producers are suffering right now, and they need our support. And to fight against the climate change, we need them more than ever. So, I would like to invite Green School to connect with the coconut community in my village, engage more locally by using their oil, and build a strong relationship with them. Buying local is not a new thing, but turning it into a habit is something that we have to learn. Thank you.
In February, I attended an internship at a wildlife conservation area called Tall Timbers in North Florida. My main focus at the internship was quail and land conservation. This was in the Red Hills region, which is a very unique area. The Red Hills region is a 436,000 area acreage located between Thomasville, Georgia and Tallahassee, Florida. Known for its rolling hills and red clay soils, the region is rich in biological diversity, historic resources, and scenic beauty. The Nature Conservancy has designated the Red Hills as one of America's last great places. Carefully managed for the propagation of bobwhite quail, the hunting plantations of the Red Hills contain a significant portion of the native longleaf pine remaining in the United States and the largest contiguous acreage on privately owned land. Through sensitive forestry practices and integrated wildlife values and prescribed burning, landowners have made a significant contribution to maintaining the biological heritage of the Red Hills region. In the Red Hills, more than 64 threatened and endangered plant and animal species find refuge, while healthy forests are selectively harvested for timber. The internship was an 8-week program from January to February that is designed to show young people Tall Timber's land ethic and exemplary land stewardship. I worked at the Tall Timbers Research Station and was exposed to a wide array of activities in a short period of time. Prescribed burning and wildlife management, preserving the historical and natural features of the Red Hills region, as well as educating and training in the field. I worked on many interesting things throughout my time, such as wildlife research, radio tracking quail, avian and mammal trapping, predator index, as well as quail trapping research and translocation. I also worked on nest predator trapping and feral hog trapping, as well as a few basic power equipment operations. Land conservation is the process of protecting natural land. This means that an owner dedicates a certain amount of acres on his land that can never be built on and has to be kept the same for the environment. Ducks Unlimited is an American nonprofit organization dedicated to the conservation of wetlands, associated upland habitats for waterfowl and other wildlife. It has a membership of around 700,000 since 2013. Ducks Unlimited was founded by a group of waterfowl hunters in the 1930s, and today 90% of the members are waterfowl hunters. Through the support of these sportsmen, Ducks Unlimited has been able to conserve more than 12.5 million acres across North America. In Florida and Georgia, they have conserved more than 50,000 acres dedicated to quail and other wildlife preservation. On my internship, I learned about prescribed burning and the importance of it. Fire was a cultural thing and a land management practice going back to the Native Americans. The Europeans that settled this area burned for cattle raising, timber, pest control, and as well to keep the land open. Burning was a very common practice, and it was not unusual until sometime after World War I and World War II, when mechanization increased and people started leaving the country to go to the city. When the federal government wanted to rebuild timber stocks in the U.S., the Forest Service adopted a system of basically row crop timber farming. Fire was not a part of that. There was also a widespread education program throughout the South to stomp out fire. From an ecological perspective, they like a wide, varied burn series from February to May at a frequency of about 2 years. At 2 years, you have a diversity of grasses, forbs, and shrubs. It's better for quail, tortoises, sparrows, and butterflies because there are a lot of seed producers, and you end up with more of a pine savanna system, which is a classic look for the quail plantations. The right fire at the right place at the right time can do many great things for the environment. The main ways it helps are by reducing hazardous fuels, protecting human communities from extreme fires. It also minimizes the spread of pests, insects, and disease, removes unwanted species that threaten the native species to the ecosystem, provides forage for animals, improves habitat for threatened and endangered species, recycles nutrients back to the soil, and promotes the growth of trees, wildflowers, and other plants. More prescribed fire means fewer extreme wildfires. In an average year, the Florida Forest Service will issue approximately 88,000 authorizations, allowing landowners and agencies to burn over 2.1 million acres. However, there are many restrictions when it comes to burning. You must go to your local government to acquire a permit in order to burn, and you will also have to take a course in order to earn your burn license. This course goes in depth on maintaining fires as well as knowing how to control them. Quail are very low in the food chain and are subject to predation from various critters, including bobcats, coyotes, foxes, raccoons, possums, hawks, owls, and snakes. One of the biggest issues in the wildlife management in the US is feral hogs. Hogs cause extensive damage to agricultural crops, livestock, forests, and the environment. They have detrimental effect on wildlife and native species. The feral hog is a non-native species as well as an invasive species brought to the Americas by Spanish explorers in the early 1500s as a widely available food source. Wild pigs originated as domestic stock, and they were favored for lease due to their unmatched survivability and because of low effort required to raise them. They cause over $1 billion in damage in the US annually, and they range from about 150 to 400 pounds. They specifically affect quail by eating all the feed meant for the quail, as well as destroying the ground habitats where quail live. Many landowners spend huge amounts of money trying to trap as many as possible. However, the hogs are very intelligent and hard to trap, and this has led to mass spread of them across the United States. During my time at Tall Timbers, one of the main things we did was trapping, banding, and releasing quail. The process of doing this was quite interesting. First, we would make a trap site that has flat land and clean out any area. We would basically remove any sticks or leaves because the quail prefer a clean site. To bait the sites, we would place corn or milo on the site, and we would then place the traps over the bait. These traps were made of chicken wire and would allow for the quail to walk in but not out, and it didn't harm the birds. Later at night, we would drive to the traps and take the birds out and put them in bird bags according to the trap that they were caught in. We would then take them back to the lab and put them in boxes separated by cage name to keep all the birds that came together. We then put bands on their legs to keep a record of them so we know who's who. We then track them with radio trackers that we put on their necks over the next few weeks in the forest. For this, we have to head into the forest with a radio telemetry pole to find out what direction they are based in on the different noises. We can find out within 10 to 15 feet, and we then record this on the app. We did this to know what areas the quail like to be in, and we do this for the Quail Census to see how many quail are in a specific area. If we catch a bird with a tracker already on it, we'll take it off. We do this Quail Census to show landowners what area the quail like the most. When the birds die, the tracker will tell us that it has died, and we will then go into the field and figure out how, whether it was a bird or a mammal or others. It's important to know this to also figure out what other types of species are in the forest. Tall Timbers also has a different census on the different species, and it's also good to know what the quail aggressors are in the area. When you band them, you mark down their gender from colors. The females are typically lighter and the males are darker. You can tell their age by their feathers, and we can tell up to a certain date. You then weigh them in a bag, and that's all. We then, all in all, I'm very fortunate to have attended such a great internship. I really enjoyed my time there and learned more about nature than I thought. I believe that everyone needs to be educated on the nature, specifically the nature in your area. I hope you all enjoyed. 1.
25 people executed by firing squad, 18 in the last 7 years. 100% of all executions in the last 7 years. Another 230 people awaiting their execution, all on drug charges. As we all know, this pandemic has forced a change on all of us and all of what we do. Originally, my Greenstone would have included my findings from a class that would have been taught with my research as the basis of the class. Due to the pandemic, I wasn't able to teach the class this year, but I will be teaching it next year. Also, please note that I am in no way advocating the use or trade in illicit drugs. At the beginning of the year, I had no idea what I was going to do for my Greenstone. I started to think about topics I have been interested in, like gun control and
reef protection. And then I remembered a class I took in grade 10. It was called Drugs, Justice, and Harm Reduction. The information from that class really stuck with me, and as I've grown up in Indonesia, it wasn't uncommon for me to hear news stories related to drugs. One of the things that interested me from that class wasn't something I learned about drugs, but instead my poor understanding concerning the laws about drugs. During one assignment, we had to choose a country to study its laws relating to drugs. I've never really been interested in looking into the laws because I've been told them my whole life, which is that you either go to jail for a very long time or you get the death sentence. And although I knew the laws and I was sure of that, I still chose Indonesia. I was surprised with the information that came to me. It wasn't exactly what I'd been told. And I felt as though what I knew about Indonesia relating to drugs was somewhat misinformed. Broadly, what I believed was correct. However, I found it much more complex than I'd expected. I wasn't the only one who thought we knew the laws here. I had the same thoughts as most other kids living in Bali and other parts of Indonesia. Although my Greenstone is based on drugs and their laws, after talking to a parent about substance abuse, I became interested in knowing more about what was going on in Indonesia regarding alcohol and tobacco items as well. I wanted to know why it was so easy for anyone to buy alcohol or cigarettes from a supermarket or local warung, but drugs, and specifically drugs that were starting to be used medically in other countries, could send you to jail. I began to look at statistics and found that according to the World Health Organization, 8 million people die each year from use of tobacco. 3 million more as a result of the harmful use of alcohol, and illicit drugs were responsible for just over 750,000 deaths. I was shocked to find these figures and see what little action was being done, not only in Indonesia, but around the world. It seemed like talk about drugs was being highlighted so much that something we see every day we had become desensitized to. Kids smoking on the streets, young adults drinking in warungs. But the only thing we heard was how bad illicit drugs are. So why hasn't Indonesia done anything about it? There's no one answer, but like most things I've found in other countries as well, it likely came down to money. There are a lot of people, especially young people. If you say there's a death penalty in Indonesia, they still say, yeah, but there's lots of other people doing it, so I can do it too. But they have no idea the cost of the Russian roulette they're going to start playing. Passage from the book Snowing in Bali. As this is a really controversial topic, I wanted to do a bit of my own research, instead of grabbing information from unfamiliar sites online. So I decided to go to the infamous Karabokan prison, also known as Hotel K, and interview a few inmates there that were incarcerated for drug-related cases. It was very time-consuming gaining permission to conduct the interviews. First, we required a letter from Green School, explaining what I wanted to do and why. I then visited the Denpasar Government Regional Office, or Kanwil, with this letter to seek permission to conduct these interviews. After waiting and being granted permission, we received a permission letter from Kanwil to take with us to the prison, to allow me to perform the interviews. It turned out we had to do this twice, because the male and female inmates were separated into 2 different prisons in 2015. I had also planned to hold other interviews with different parties, but again, due to the circumstances, I was unable to. I interviewed both dealers and users, asking them questions about drug education, in schools, their stories, and of course the narcotic laws. I spoke to both Westerners and locals. When I asked about any background education on drugs, I was shocked to hear from all of them that they had no previous education around drugs while they were in school. What they had learned was mostly from biased news sources. Although they didn't get an education on drugs, a few said that they think it would make a major difference in the way people think. They believe that it should be a program in schools around Indonesia, and they would have appreciated the education they should have received. However, one inmate from out of Indonesia didn't think education would help at all, and might actually make things worse, which I found really interesting. When I asked her why she thought that, she told me that sex education didn't work either, and teens were still having sex. I think what she failed to understand was that sex education was not about abstinence, but instead about understanding. While doing my research, I also noted that a majority of the US drug education programs use abstinence as their goal. While I believe the intention was good, past studies have proved that abstinence is not an achievable goal. A subject that came up a lot when I was interviewing the women there was rehab. So I started to do some more research into rehab, more specifically in Bali. I found that even if drug users wanted to stop what they're doing, it would be extremely difficult to do so in Bali, as there are no rehabilitation centers targeted towards lower class citizens. Although this is the case, Bali's getting called a rehabilitation haven, and that's because the centers available are targeted towards people out of Indonesia and out of Bali, and they cost between $200 and $800+ a night, which for the Western world may be considered cheap, but for Indonesia's minimum monthly wage of less than $180, it's extremely expensive and rarely thought about. During another one of my interviews with a former Bali 9 member, he brought up an interesting point I hadn't really thought about, and that was about how drugs were perceived in pop culture and repeated by young men and women who had never seen, used, or touched the drugs they were going on about. When I started to think about what he'd said, I could see people all around me romanticizing drugs from songs they'd heard that they'd never seen before. I felt like looking deeper into this pop culture reference was important, as it was something my classmates and I could relate to. And seeing as rap has been the most popular genre of music in the past few years, I was interested in seeing how drug references in rap started and where it is now. In a study done by Denise Hurd, an associate professor at the University of California, Berkeley, she found that from the most popular rap songs between 1979 and 1984, only 4 songs, or 11%, contained drug references. Later, in 2005, that number jumped to 77%. What interested me most about this was that the study was conducted only a few years after the war on drugs had begun. And the 4 songs that sung about drugs in the 70s and 80s were highlighting the bad parts of drug use. Now, 4 decades into the war on drugs, the use of the term drugs in music has become a prominent topic, but in a different light. And this made me think of how the war on drugs has been successful or unsuccessful. I've heard a lot about the war on drugs in America, but I didn't really understand what I was being told because I hadn't really looked into it. So I decided to look into it because I've been told multiple times that it was a major influence for Indonesia's harsh narcotic laws. The war on drugs started in 1971, with its motive being to stop illegal drug use and distribution around America by increasing prison sentences for drug users and dealers. It's been questioned on its success rate, and the American support for the war on drugs has decreased in recent decades. Between 2009 and 2013, around 40 states took action to soften their drug laws, reducing penalties and shortening the mandatory minimum sentences. Some Americans and policymakers feel the campaign has been a failure and believe it's led to a racial divide. During an interview in 1994 with President Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, he was quoted saying, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or blacks. But by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." You may be wondering if the Indonesian narcotic laws were influenced by the war on drugs in America. By the information I found, I'd definitely say it did influence it. However, it did not cause Indonesia to create their laws. Actually, the Indonesian narcotic laws were introduced during the Dutch colonization and put into place in the early 20th century. The US war on drugs influenced what's been going on in Indonesia for the past few decades, but it's failing, and the decriminalization of marijuana in some states may have influenced Indonesia as well. Jokowi became president in 2014. He vowed to his people that he would be stricter on the drug laws. However, in recent years, he's been publicly open to a death penalty review. But he wants the public support. And seeing by 2015 poll might be difficult to gain, seeing as 85% of Indonesians support the death penalty for drug traffickers. After I came up with the topic of drugs and laws in Indonesia, I had to come up with a project. I was thinking of making a documentary because I'd been interested in film, and it seemed like a perfect project. I could mix them together. But it was a lot more complicated than just saying, I want to make a documentary. And another factor was that the topic of the drug laws in Indonesia is always changing. I went back to the beginning and remembered what inspired me, a class. I decided that I was going to teach a class on everything I'd learned throughout this process, and teach students what they needed to know, so they weren't misinformed like I was. I'd like to see the class I'm currently designing conducted each school year, once the research and the class details are complete and approved. My goal is to explain the reality of drugs and the laws that regulate them. Specifically, I'll be focusing in Indonesia. Drug education in schools is key to understanding what is going on in the world, why some countries have put major restrictions on them and others have decided to decriminalize them. Before we choose to take a stance on either side, we have to look at both. Once again, I'm not advocating the use of drugs. I'm advocating for the drug education in Indonesia or whatever country you may be in. Before I go, I'd like to say thank you to my teachers who have helped me along this way, people I've interviewed along, and especially my family. Thank you.
I'm Flinkochi. Thank you for taking the time to watch my Greenstone, which is titled Back to the Start. I'm grateful to have landed in Natchez, Mississippi after leaving Bali due to the COVID-19 crisis. I've unexpectedly found myself surrounded by farms, forests, lakes, and a supportive community of people who grew up here and know how to live off the land. History is rich in this area, but not all of it's good. Set on the banks of the Mississippi River, bordering Louisiana, this region was known for its rich soil, cotton plantations, and unfortunately, the slaves who were forced to run them. My subsequent move here has inspired me to rethink my Greenstone in that I wanted to learn to live off the land as others here do by starting a garden, and also learn how to fish, hunt, and forage, and address some things that have become very important to me, which are food, health, and the environment. My newfound curiosity about food brought me to believe that everyone should know more about where their food comes from, and, surprisingly, the vast majority of us don't. We have drifted so far from knowing the source of our food. Many of us unconsciously pick items off the shelves in supermarkets without a second thought to where it comes from. Humans, as well as the planet as a whole, are getting sick from this lack of consciousness. I believe that we all need to come back to our roots and reintegrate the natural methods used for thousands of years. Back in the day, soil was simply enriched by animal manure and the leftovers from crops like beans and peas. But the equilibrium was destroyed when we began running farms like factories. Here in the United States, small farms are disappearing and are being replaced by huge factory farms, with large corporations in charge and profit being their number one goal. With this shift, more food is being produced, but to the detriment of the environment, human health, animal welfare, and the demise of local farming. The industry has no time for rhythms of nature. It has no seasons and no patience. With the ever-growing population on the earth, and much of it being centralized in cities, there's a place in the equation for large-scale food production. I would like to think we could all go back to our origins with no need for industrialization. But can you imagine if there were 8 million hunters and gatherers in New York City? We have to face the fact that our civilization has irreversibly changed, and with that comes a need for efficiency, but it should be done ethically and responsibly. Large livestock farms have an enormous impact on our environment. They yield a relatively small amount of meat, dairy, and eggs compared to the staggering quantities of waste and greenhouse gases it produces, polluting our land, air, water, and contributing to climate change. The demand for meat is not only a major factor in the planet's pollution, but it is a risk factor for pandemics as well. The vast majority of meat comes from factory farms. In these huge industrialized facilities that supply more than 90% of meat globally, and around 99% of America's supply, animals are tightly packed together and live under harsh and unsanitary conditions, compromising their immune systems and making them more susceptible to contagious diseases, such as the 2009 swine flu that killed hundreds of thousands of people. To make matters worse, selection for specific genes in farmed animals for desirable traits like large chicken breasts have made these animals almost genetically identical, meaning that a virus can easily be spread from animal to animal without encountering any genetic variants that might stop it in its tracks. Animals born and raised in this manner are fed GMO corn, wheat, and soy that are all grown through industrial farming that uses large amounts of pesticides, antibiotics, and hormones, which are passed on to the people who eat them. GMOs were created to improve the yield of a crop by genetically modifying the plant's organisms to have resistance to pests, diseases, chemical treatments, and environmental conditions. The most common modification to our crops is resistant to the weed killer Roundup, which has officially been classified as a probable human carcinogen. Exposure has been shown to cause liver disease, birth defects, reproductive problems, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. It is insane this stuff is legal. Surprisingly, many of these chemicals are widely used in our crops and animals with minimal testing and regulations. Today, more than 90% of the corn, soybeans, cotton, and canola planted in the U.S. is derived from seeds genetically engineered. Monsanto, DuPont Pioneer, and Syngenta have taken major control of the agriculture market by patenting hybrid seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, and weed killers, and imposing their own rules by aligning government posts with former Monsanto bigwigs. These companies are embedded into the highest levels of government, that help them sway legislation and rulings in their favor. I would call this legal corruption. As an example, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas worked as an attorney in the Pesticide and Agriculture Division for Monsanto Company for 21 years. FDA Commissioner for Foods Michael Taylor was Monsanto's Vice President for Public Policy from 1998 to 2001. Even former President Barack Obama signed off on a bill that barred federal courts from stopping the sale or growing of GMO crops, no matter what the health issues may arise. These companies are even in Indonesia. Monsanto was fined $1 million for violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act from 1997 to 2002 by failing to record approximately $700,000 of illegal payments to at least 140 current and former Indonesian government officials. Another way these companies stay on top is by spreading misinformation and stomping out all opposition. In 2013, the March Against Monsanto movement initiated protests across the world when California's Proposition 37, a ballot initiative that would have required labeling food products made with GMOs, failed to pass because Monsanto and other food advocacy groups spent nearly $45 million to defeat the campaign. And you wonder why most people don't know the facts. Agriculture Gag Laws, otherwise known as Gag Laws, have been put in place where activists or whistleblowers can be charged as terrorists and imprisoned for years for simply exposing the crimes and abuse happening on farms. This is where we should all draw the line, because now they're not only poisoning our food, but they're using their power to arrest people looking to expose the truth. Not only do they use their power to keep information from coming forward, but they attempt to confuse consumers with wording and labeling. Misinformation comes in many forms, the most common being deceptive labeling on a product's packaging. The most common misleading labels concern the terms free range, non-GMO, all natural, and organic. Free range, by definition, means that livestock is kept in natural conditions and have the freedom of movement, but with no official certification needed, there is no guarantee that these animals are kept in humane conditions. The non-GMO label does not require an official certification either, proving that it isn't a GMO product. The all-natural label is one of the most abused terms because the FDA has deliberately chosen not to define what constitutes what is all-natural, therefore allowing major abuses. Organic, which means it is produced without the use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or other artificial agents. But even with the USDA organic seal, companies are allowed to sell their products with only 90% natural product. It makes you wonder what that other 10% is made of. Consumer advocacy groups are fighting this unethical behavior by pushing to enact a law that requires accurate labeling. The corporations are fighting back because they profit from our confusion and doubt. In 2014, the state of Vermont became the first state to enact a law requiring the labeling of genetically engineered food. But in response, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, among others, filed a lawsuit in federal court to block Vermont GMO labeling law from taking effect. After discovering how messed up the food industry is on all levels, I knew I had to learn where my food comes from for myself. I no longer wanted to be solely relying on what I could find in the supermarket. Here in Mississippi, I had an abundance of land, sunshine, and wildlife, and I, with the help of experienced mentors, learned how to fish, forage, and garden. I caught my first catfish, which was gross to clean but delicious to eat. I also joined a hunt for wild chanterelle mushrooms, and luckily hit the jackpot, and ended with a basket full, which we used in nat risotto. I also even tried my hand at raising chickens, with a coop and everything they would need to survive. But unfortunately, they only lasted 2 days before some animals got to them overnight. I'm excited to try again, though, after fortifying the coop and learning from my costly mistake. My journey into connecting with my food started soon after we arrived in Natchez, with me helping in my neighbor's garden, which was an incredible experience for someone who has never planted a thing in his life, and this inspired me to start my own. My new friend, in return, shared his expertise and helped me select the right location with good sun exposure, proper drainage, and correct pH levels for the optimal garden. On my land, I knew there would be no pesticides, no herbicides, or any other toxic chemicals that you often find in products on supermarket shelves. What I soon realized was that gardening is a science. You can't just throw some seeds in the ground and hope they grow. You have to treat them like kids. They need a shower and a meal each day. I learned that to have a successful garden, I would have to find out what grows well in Mississippi, what needs more sun, what needs more water, how far to space each plant, and how to set up a soaker hose system for watering. I mapped the distance needed in between each plant, and based on the yield I was looking for, I ended up with a 30 by 30 plot. I chose to make an outdoor garden rather than working in the existing greenhouses that were on the property. In making that choice, I gave away the control I had in the greenhouse to work with the natural cycles of the environment. Yet another friend came by with his tractor and helped me till the soil. My family and I salvaged fence postings and chicken wire to build a fence to protect my garden from all the hungry wildlife around us. After all this research and labor, we finally got the seeds in the ground. We planted cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, okra, squash, red onions, chives, basil, cilantro, oregano, strawberries, and red peppers. All the vegetables and fruits I love. It has not been all smooth sailing though. Not even a week into the completed garden, the soaker hose was chopped by a lawnmower. This was a pretty big setback at the time, but actually turned out to be a positive, because I not only started to spend more time in my garden hand watering, but I got to see the day-to-day growth. It felt so good to finally connect to the earth and get my hands dirty. With each day, I saw myself gain a more emotional connection to my plants. After weeks of waking up each morning to water, tend, and observe the new growth, Miss Jenny, the 87-year-old mayor of Natchez, who was born and raised here, came by to give me her advice, which was that everything was looking good and it was time to harvest some of my cucumbers and squash. I can't tell you the deep satisfaction I finally felt bringing in vegetables that would feed my family and friends. A salad has never tasted as good as that night. I've since developed a real love for cooking. Whether it's ingredients out of my garden or not, I realized how sacred the whole process is and how essential it is to our well-being. I've been taught so many things about flavor, spices, and so many other tips and tricks that I will use forever. After all this, I realized I was missing one thing, and that was composting, which to me is the completion of the cycle. I'm now growing and cooking the food we eat, and what we don't eat goes back to the garden to reboot nutrients in the soil and grow a healthier crop next time. What we eat and how we get it has become a daily part of my life. Our community is centered around food and the sharing of meals, recipes, and how-tos, where everyone brings their special expertise to the table. With this journey, I now feel a real connection with the land and this community on a level I never thought I would before. I've realized food and the way we handle it is a common bond for all of us. It is a sacred part of each of our lives in that it unites people and nurtures us on so many levels. And this is why we should care where it comes from.
To begin a journey, there is always excitement and many challenges. The only thing that keeps us from wandering off is the way we map our path, or to follow paths that have been taken before us. To begin a journey by yourself, you must have passion, motivation, and ambition. And to begin a journey shared by others, it is often hard to find where your path is. From a young age, I grew up in a house filled with inspiring, goal-orientated, and highly motivated people. I strived to be as original and unique as they were. I was influenced by them to pursue a life of leadership, entrepreneurship, activism, and so much more. But every time I started to pursue a passion, I had trouble keeping with it. For instance, I was very, very keen to become a fashion designer. However, when I saw other people around me had a similar interest, I gave up this passion. I was scared that I would fail. I was petrified that I would not be unique enough. I wanted to be my own person. I desperately wanted to be unoriginal. This idea put so much stress on me that I started devaluing myself. I told myself I wasn't authentic. I stopped being inspired. I stopped dreaming. And I asked myself, am I destined to live in the shadows of the 9-to-5 corporate hustle? And for those who don't feel the same as I do, if you can, please close your eyes. Imagine you're in a room with a blank canvas staring at you. You have all the paintbrushes and all the paint in the world. You have all the freedom to paint whatever you want. Now, imagine 32 other people in that same room with you, with the same things you have. A blank canvas, paintbrushes, and paint. Imagine now the stress of wanting to be unique in your own creativity. How can someone truly be unique? This led me to give up many ideas and got me in a spiral rejecting many dreams. I started making a habit of rejecting projects and initiatives. This gave me an immense amount of guilt and embarrassment. I just didn't feel good enough. I saw others striving and paving their own paths, some of them doing exactly what I had planned to do. The only difference was that they weren't as afraid to fail as I was. But I was wrong. My friends were going through similar obstacles. They were also searching and stopping and jumping from idea to idea. This is when a realization struck me. Why do we value uniqueness when we are all the same? Why do we strive to be more unique than others? Why are we so afraid to collaborate, co-create, and co-learn together? It was odd that we were creating all these unnecessary roadblocks instead of forging and creating a community of support. At this time, I knew this was going to be my idea. This was going to be my passion project. And this is how I was going to create that dream community of support. And how I was going to do that was to start a shared space of like-minded teenagers, young people who can freely share ideas, cross-pollinate between them, between different creative disciplines, build an amazing culture, an amazing alternative culture of young minds. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, when I started to research the idea, I had several discussions of how ambitiously expensive this was going to be. However, all underdog stories have a silver lining, and mine was fortunately being introduced to a class. At this very time, I was lucky that one of my teachers ran a class in the co-working industry. I immediately joined the class in hope of finding that dream community I was looking for. The class became a live demonstration of how a co-working space works, with the people and the dynamics between them. I learned through experience. I loved learning about the many challenges, and despite several letdowns, there were also a great number of satisfactions. I was hooked instantly to this idea of co-working. This was everything I wanted to do, but this time it was more of a realistic dream. Now I was ready to create a space for a community of like-minded teenagers, collaborating, co-creating, and co-learning together. We would work as a team to create the space, to be versatile for any needs, bring cool and interesting talks to inspire and teach others. This space is for the students, by the students. So I started my field work visiting most co-working spaces around Bali. My first interaction was in a co-working space in Ubud called Outpost. Whilst I did enjoy some of the workshops like a film screening and a discussion panel afterwards, I felt the overall atmosphere was quite stern and intimidating. Visually, the space felt boxed off and rigid. For example, there was an area in the space called the Quiet Zone, where individuals would work in complete silence. This was the opposite of the co-working space that I had imagined for teenagers. And as you all know, we teenagers can't be quiet. We love the rumble and tussle of creativity. During the month of March, I attended CU Asia, the largest co-working conference in the world. I was lucky, thanks to Chris Thompson, to be able to spend 3 full days with hundreds of experts in the co-working industry, many of them just like me who had just founded a co-working space. The 3-day conference allowed me to deep dive into everything I wanted to know about this industry. information and insights that I did not find in my previous research. Workshops, talks, team exercises. I felt like a kid in a candy store. One of my biggest takeaways was that our co-working space is actually more than just a shared office space. It is in fact a community of like-minded people who believe in creativity, who believe in collaboration, social interaction, and sustainable networking. What I had found extremely valuable were the human stories that people had said and told and brought to the table. And it was these stories that brought people together and created the dream community I was looking for. This idea of community is what I want to take back to Green School and build a space with my peers and my friends called The Nest. An anonymous survey I conducted after the conference, it became clear that the students were more comfortable reaching out to their peers about problem solving and ideation rather than teachers and adults. I decided that that would be the core idea of The Nest, to give students a safe space, not only to be a shared office space, but also a therapeutic space where they can empower one another and encourage others to pursue ideas and dreams of their own. The Nest was going to focus on community, social impact, cultural immersion, and sustainable networking. I had finally found my calling. I felt confident in my idea and purpose, and even though I felt hopeless in the past, and even if I shed a few tears, I now finally felt that I had accomplished a small part of my dream. To all those who have felt lost as I did, I want to assure you that it is okay to feel lost. My advice is just to, keep your head down and explore and experiment, and don't be so afraid of making mistakes. This journey will only lead you to your dreams. And the purpose of The Nest is just that. To create a space for you so we can support your dream, however big or small. Thank you. Oh.
Dear Ben, your mom has been sending us pictures of all of the amazing things you've been creating. Looking forward to one day owning a Ben blue hat. You can call your company, when you get one, Benny Ben Originals. My granny sent me that message a couple of weeks ago, along with the Billy Crystal joke. These were words of encouragement and support from my grandparents, which are not out of the ordinary. She sent me messages like this ever since I got on Facebook, commenting on every small project I've done or I've been a part of. This time, however, those words meant a lot more than any other time it was said. Let me explain why. Ever since my first day at Green School in grade 4, I felt like I could do anything. Honestly, I thought I could just sail passion fruit boats with Chayden and explore down by the river, collect eggs from the chicken coop and vegetables from the class gardens as a part of my education until the day that I graduated. And then middle school came along. The older kids, the quest projects, the algebra classes, it soon became clear to me that I would have to bear more responsibilities compared to my primary school life. So sailing through middle school, we had finally made it the 8th grade. And it was time to do a quest project, but what to do? So a guideline for quest is you have to do something that relates to social justice or sustainability. And so at the time, it was 2015, and forests were burning in Borneo, and they were disappearing, and so were orangutans, and so Tree was born. Some of you might already know what Tree is, and some of you might know me for being a part of Tree. But for those who don't, let my past self explain.
Hello everybody, my name is Ben Fidgel and I'm the co-founder of a social enterprise called Tree Upcycle. So Tree raises awareness about deforestation and supports forest protectors in Indonesia. We want people all around the world to give a damn about Indonesia's forests and want them to understand how their consumption contributes to deforestation in Indonesia. So why would anyone in New York or Paris or Vancouver give a damn about Indonesia's forests?
So, to recap, Tree is a social enterprise and we're all about upcycling. We take in discarded fabrics and we turn them into products to promote conscious consumption. With the profits that we make from selling these products, we send to grassroots organizations that are on the ground doing something to protect Indonesia's forests. Did you catch all that? It was pretty fast, but that was the elevator pitch that I had memorized for Tree over the past 4 years. I must have said it to over 1,000 people, but there was just something missing from it. It was missing heart and authenticity. So, picture this. It's December 2017, and I'm in my first semester of grade 10. And at this point, tree presentations are coming very easily to me and just rolling off my tongue. I'm at the end of a 6-month journey that took me all around the world, and I've given presentations in 12 countries to audiences large and small for Tree. I find myself walking in a back alley in Bhaktapur, Kathmandu, on the way to this presentation. We're late, but I'm dragging my heels. My dad's walking 200 meters in front of me, but I'm not trying to catch up. I'm finally coming to grips with the difference between a passion and a duty. You see, I care about orangutans. I care about Indonesia's forests, and I did want to do something to contribute. I wanted to fulfill my school's expectation of me being a green leader. But this isn't my passion. This cause is not what lights my fire. So I tell my dad I want out of Tree. I don't want to do this presentation. But my dad reminded me of a previous commitment I'd made. Hundreds of people were already waiting for me to do a presentation that I was already late for. So this wasn't the time to back out. However, I had a very important realization then and there. Did I have a passion for protecting Indonesia's forests? No, not really. But that's not to say it wasn't something that I still believed in and supported. When it came to my interests, I was confused and unable to separate what I believed was the right thing to do and what would actually get me out of bed in the morning. Something that I was genuinely passionate about. Now imagine this. It's March 2020, and after changing my Greenstone topic over 7 times, I come at a crossroads. At the beginning of this year, I was thinking of creating a collection of clothing that included Balinese symbols. But me being an international person using Balinese symbols, to me, I thought that would cause offense. So I dropped it. And by the time it was February, I had an internship at Starter Lab, and I was trying to get my foot in the door in the sourdough world. So in the first week of quarantine, when COVID hit, I was stuck at home, asking myself, yet again, was sourdough the thing that excited me? Was I making loaves of bread? No, not really. And I found myself feeling the exact same way as I was feeling when I was walking to that presentation in Kathmandu. Asking myself, was this really what I cared about in my heart of hearts? Or was this just a good story about bringing people together and making bread? In my head, I found that the concept that I created for my project had just been contrived just so that I would have a Greenstone topic. And I came to the conclusion that it's really not what I wanted to do. Bread wasn't my thing. Bread wasn't my driving force. But what was? Rewind. So it's grade 8, and I start caring more and more about my appearance. So I start shopping at fast fashion stores like H&M and Zara with my mom, just to get the essentials. And once I start wearing those clothes, I immediately start feeling better about the way I look. It's grade 9, and I begin wanting to wear more unique clothing, so I start thrifting. I would thrift at Pasar Kodok, and I would thrift at Goodwills in Canada over the summer. And I would collect vintage t-shirts and pants, and I would start having a more unique style. In grade 10, I got more into mainstream brands like Bape and Palace and Supreme, and it was all about the hype. And I would line outside in the cold for hours in London just to get a t-shirt with a brand name slapped on it for $60. In grade 11, my friend Flynn showed me Japanese designers, and I started growing an interest for that. So I would look online on this site called Grailed for hours just to find pieces of Yohji Yamamoto or Number 9 or Comme des Garçons, all of these brands. So halfway through my grade 11 year, I took my first ever sewing class with an ex-Green School parent named Antonia. This was for Jalan Jalan, and it was about how to make clothes, and she taught me the absolute basics. How to make a pattern, what seam allowance was, and how to operate an industrial sewing machine. And during this class, I had this idea. I wanted to make a pair of pants that had a half circle on each leg, so when I put my legs together, it would make a whole circle. See, I wasn't into design. There was no deeper meaning behind the circle. I just wanted to have a pair of pants that had a circle on it. And I wanted these pair of pants on my body, like right now. And 6 weeks later, during these classes, never finished them. They were left as a half-done project that laid in my room for another year. I had also proceeded to complete a design course with a green school parent named Taya, who had taught me how to make mood boards and color schemes, crochets, and how to make a collection cohesive. Fast forward to my grade 12 year, I'd begun taking sewing classes with another green school parent named Valerie, who was always patient with me, and she helped me finish my first ever piece of clothing. This is what it looks like. There was no better feeling to me than wearing something that I made, with her help, of course. And then I was halfway done with another pair of shorts I was making until the class suddenly came to an end. See, all of these experiences sewing was not enough for me to just make anything I wanted out of thin air, but it was enough for me to want to. I finally had this feeling of wanting to do something, not for anybody else, but for me. I wanted to make my own clothes so that I would have something that no one else had, something that you couldn't find at a shop or at a thrift store, online. So I took a break from sewing. I had a machine, but I hadn't used it since Valerie's class ended. And until COVID hit, I was focusing on another Greenstone topic about sourdough bread. Then around March 14th, when COVID got more serious, my family decided on a 2-week quarantine. No in and out of the house. Absolute lockdown. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that I was really, 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 really bored for those 2 weeks. And then, during those 2 weeks, I remembered I had a machine, but I didn't have any fabric. So I had to improvise. I looked around the house and I found all these old cushion covers. I cut them up, made huge sheets of fabric out of them, and from then on it was really just up to my imagination. I started with a mask. Why buy a mask in the store if you could just learn how to make one? So I did. I learned how to make a beach hat. I made 4. I made a bag. I made a bag with dog print on it to put my dog inside. And then I made a bag that was shaped and looked like a mushroom. Why? Because no one was there telling me I couldn't make a bag that was shaped like a mushroom. No one was telling me that the mushroom bag wasn't part of the assignment. So I finally had creative freedom. I moved on. Remember those pants I was talking to you about, the circle pants? I finished them, and I'm wearing them right now, and I love them. I made a pattern for a kimono-looking jacket, and with a bit of prior knowledge of how to make one, I winged it, and it turned out better than I expected. I wanted to make cargo pants. So I tore up a light green cushion cover. I cut out my pattern. I cut pockets, and I cut cargo pockets as well. And then I just had to assemble. But I wasn't too familiar of how to put the whole thing together. So one day, I went to the tailor. And this tailor, this guy, has been what my family has been sending our stuff to for the past couple of years. When we have a rip in our clothing, when we need a little bit of tailoring, we always just send it to this guy. And I never met him in person. So I did meet him in person. And his name was Dedek. And off the bat, he was super, super friendly. He told me that I could come work in his shop after I told him that I had an interest in making my own clothing. I then took out my clothes. I showed him the clothes that I had had. And you know what he said? He said, "You'll never have a clothing brand of your own if the quality is this bad." He said, "Your clothes aren't touched up. The insides should be serged. It's overall sloppy." And my God, did he have a point? He had a point. I hadn't even realized that the stuff that I'd been making had a completely unfinished look. And here I was, getting verbally destroyed by the local tailor on the side of the road. The thing was, I wasn't even mad. I needed to hear all of that. Besides, this is the thing that has finally started to ignite my passion. When he said all of these things about the clothes I made, I was glad to know that there was so much more that I could learn. Learning. You know, it's interesting what happens in life when a little bit of school gets out of the way. I'd like to give a quick shout out to my teacher Pak Mo and Pak Noan for standing their ground on student-directed learning and meeting me where I was at. LEAP gave me the skills to activate and to create with whatever I had around me. I didn't jump through all the hoops. I've never been that great at my grades and doing well at school. I didn't meet all of the expectations that were put on me by my parents or by my teachers or by the school. And sometimes receiving comments like this on my report card didn't feel all around constructive or encouraging, and I never felt like I was succeeding as a whole. But this was part of the process of being true to myself, figuring out who I am and what matters to me. This process has been about me learning to do things on my own terms and for my own reasons. So let's bring it back to the very beginning, when I got that message from my granny on Facebook. I didn't just see it as just a supportive message. I saw it as a report card that I never had. The report card that I've always wanted to see. Somebody validating and supporting my work and who I really was. This was authentically me. This is Benny Ben Originals. Thank you.
Once upon a time, someone got their period.
The rest is, well, existence.
Once upon a time, I got my period.
And I did too.
I stood in the sand and looked down at my swimsuit, which was now colored with blood. My 12-year-old self felt like she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. I felt immediate shame, embarrassment, and fear over the thought of anybody else finding out. My new motto, ignorance is bliss.
In an attempt to escape my 3-hour math tutoring session, I went to the bathroom and was surprised to find blood in my underwear. Although I was alone, I suddenly felt so embarrassed. My mind started spinning, and somehow I came to the conclusion that obviously nobody would know what I was going through, right?
Although I tried to conceal this new part of me from myself, I didn't do a very good job of hiding it from my mom. My mother had no idea how I was dealing with my period until she had noticed her personal supply of menstrual products had run low. One morning, I found myself in the car with her running errands. I reached the entrance of the store and followed her to the personal care aisle, which was as filled with tampons as I was with fear and anger over her taking me here. I felt like the shelves were going to cave in on me.
Despite my inevitable shame, I had this feeling like I was becoming a woman. So when I went back to work on fractions, I was part of this new secret club. And the first rule was like Fight Club. You don't talk about it. This followed me as I barely whispered the words to my sister and cringed when I told my mom. When she eventually told my dad, I couldn't fathom the thought of him knowing that this had happened to me.
Our stories are different, but we had one thing in common.
We both felt this intuitive shame.
Let us take you on a little trip.
Around the world in 4 periods.
Let's go to the US. Did you know that 70% of the country still uses a tampon tax, deeming them a luxury item? Some items that aren't taxed as a luxury include Viagra, Rogaine, and even pumpkins in certain states. Researchers have found that 64% of women in the US had been unable to afford period products. Imagine a single mother who works 2 minimum wage jobs just to keep food on the table for her family. She goes to the supermarket and picks up food for dinner and a box of tampons for her daughter, which cost $11.99. She now has to choose between healthy food and her daughter being comfortable. This is not a choice she should have to make.
Now let's travel to Kenya. Imagine Karubo, a 13-year-old girl who is one of the 65% of women in the Kibra slum alone who have traded sex for pads. In Kenya, 2 out of 3 pad users receive menstrual products from a sexual partner. In addition to this, due to the lack of education surrounding sexual health, 1 in 4 girls are not aware that menstruation is associated with pregnancy, so they do not take the correct precautions. It is heartbreaking that she has to give away her body just to take care of it.
Now, we are in the rural mountains of Nepal. Here, menstruating women are forced to practice chapati, in which they are exiled to a cowshed for days during their bleed as they are considered impure. This puts women at a risk of bacterial infections, snake bites, freezing temperatures, physical assault, and suffocation. Parbati Rawat, a 21-year-old woman, knew it was the time of the month when she would be exiled by society. She was banished to the shed by her brother-in-law. In the morning, she was found dead as her blanket had caught fire the night before, causing her to suffocate. Women are also very vulnerable to physical assault during this time as they aren't in their home environment. Their families often have to stay outside of the sheds in order to ward off male predators. This ritual was outlawed in 2005, yet a study found that 77% of West Central Nepali girls and women actively practice menstrual exile. These women have nowhere to turn as the practice is embedded within their society.
Now let's take a look at what is right in front of us. Where does Indonesia land in all of this? Religion plays a large role in the stigma that surrounds menstruation here. Both Hindu and Muslim cultures do not allow menstruators to pray or go to the temple while on their period, as these places are clean and periods are considered dirty. Imagine Putu, a young woman who is preparing to go to a ceremony with her family but realizes she cannot after she notices it's her bleed. We are not criticizing these religious decisions, yet we feel it is important to acknowledge when menstruators are treated differently, as it creates an unconscious shame within society.
These 4 stories represent the 3 components to our project: stigma, access, and sustainability. You may be wondering why the issues we've highlighted haven't been introduced to the public consciousness as immediate threats to so many people. The answer: stigma. These stories show that no matter where you are, the stigma surrounding menstruation is ever so prevalent. It takes different forms whether you're unable to afford dinner or are banished to a shed.
It begs the question, where did the stigma begin? Throughout history, menstruation has practically always been stigmatized, whether that rooted in cultural or religious beliefs. The word taboo derives from the ancient Polynesian word tapua, which means menstruation. The Bible even has a verse claiming anybody who touches a woman while on her period will be unclean for the rest of the day. In certain religions, it is believed that no matter how hard someone prays while menstruating, their God will never hear them. However, things were not always this way. A long, long time ago, our ancestors honored menstruation through practices such as the red tent, where women would come together to celebrate and share wisdom on the milestones of womanhood.
Growing up, Krishan and I were only told about menstruation in a biological sense. When educated about our periods, we were separated from the boys, so at a young age we understood this was not a topic to be talked about with the other gender. Textbooks taught us menstruation's only purpose is for reproduction. Society chooses to be comfortable with one aspect of the cycle: the fertile period. Menstruation is seen as the process to make a woman fertile when it should be acknowledged for its own importance. We didn't experience an open conversation at school or anywhere else, so understanding and connecting with our own bodies became difficult.
Upon arriving at Green School, we were both so inspired by how this community of activists interacts with each other and the world around them. This motivated us to see where we could make a positive change. We are both members of the period class in February of 2019. However, our views on menstruation were biased due to our privileged social and economic status. Green School is known to be a progressive community on many fronts, but with respect to menstruation, the subject was being overlooked, or worse, ignored. Our projects continued outside of the classroom, and alongside our good friend and 2019 graduate Regan Williams, we were able to provide sustainable menstrual products in all of the Green School bathrooms. Although we were encouraged to do this project by many, we quickly learned that the stigma surrounding menstruation hindered our community-wide support system. Despite these obstacles, we were able to receive funding to keep our product boxes stocked all year long. Our passion for this topic stayed with us, and we only grew more motivated to make a change. It was around this time when the impending question of what is your greenstone started to be circulated more than ever. We both acknowledged that we felt ready to be on the front lines of period activism, aside from the fact that it might be a bit of a bloody battle.
So, one fateful night, we asked the question, why hasn't anybody done a joint greenstone? Our topic represents unity, equality, and impact, which are all better achieved together. As we began our greenstone journey, it was imperative that we got a better sense of how menstruation is viewed here in Bali. We assumed that Balinese women were only accustomed to pads and wouldn't be eager to have an open conversation. Our assumptions were based off of our limited knowledge surrounding periods on the island. We knew that menstruating women are not allowed to pray, attend ceremonies, or go to the temple. Although the stigma surrounding menstruation is prevalent in the West, we were surprised that there are certain rules here that prohibit menstruators from certain endeavors. So, we came to our own conclusion that periods are weighted with shame and silence.
In order to test our assumptions and hopefully be proven wrong, we held women's circles with local members of the Balinese community. We discovered that despite the stigma present in Bali, their curiosity regarding menstruation made them open to having this discussion. Through the circle, the women shared that the generations before them weren't as vocal on their perspective on periods. This made them want to share their stories and be more open with their daughters.
After these circles and the more research we did, we started to ask ourselves, how is it 2020 and stigma is so present within our society? The answer is that nobody wants to talk about it. As a result of this denial, the detrimental issues continue to go unnoticed. We wanted to create a way for periods to become more visible and to build a more inclusive environment. Menstruators often feel that they have to hide the fact that they are on their periods. We choose to shift the paradigm. That is when we decided to rebrand periods.
We were having discussions with our mentor, Lisi, when she brought up the idea of women wearing something that symbolizes their bleed. So, the red scarf was born. The purpose of this scarf is to wear it while menstruating as a way to recognize power and elegance. Periods won't change, but our perspective on them will. We hope people will wear these scarves with love and pride for their period because that is what it deserves. As a society, we've been conditioned to live linearly, to just push through. And although the menstrual cycle is literally a cycle, it is treated as a straight line. We need to learn how to be in harmony with the different and equally valuable aspects of our cycle. These natural patterns reoccur in ourselves, but also in the world around us. We plant different seeds and apply different care in winter than we do spring. This is exactly how we must honor our own bodies.
The blood red scarves are made out of viscose, which is a fabric made up of sustainable elements. Our scarves are manufactured through Not a Stitch Up, which is a woman-run, eco-friendly company here in Bali. They are packaged in handmade tin boxes that are monogrammed with our logo and title, the Mara Project. We received positive feedback to the scarves from both the international and local community. Unfortunately, the pandemic halted our ability to distribute the scarves, but we were still able to hand out 50 to close friends and family.
Going back to our three components, stigma, access, and sustainability. The scarves were focused on mitigating the stigma by creating a product that makes periods more visible. However, the issue of access was not being addressed. Menstruators will spend an average of $15,000 to $20,000 in their lifetime on period products. Needless to say, this is an incredible expense for a product that is essential for taking care of the human body. Toilet paper is provided in every public restroom and seen as a necessity. So why are period products? Roughly half the female population menstruates. Did you know that 800 million people menstruate every day? and 500 million of those people live in period poverty. Period poverty refers to the inadequate access to menstrual hygiene tools and education, including but not limited to sanitary products, washing facilities, and waste management. In India, only 12% of menstruators have access to menstrual products. Other items used include old rags, sawdust, pieces of mattresses, socks, and other materials that could easily induce infection.
Lack of access creates unfortunate consequences and hinders menstruators' social and economic prospects. Not only is using alternative items as an absorbent or no products at all extremely uncomfortable, it prevents girls from attending school, work, or social engagements. In 2018 alone, more than 137,700 girls missed school in the UK due to their periods and a lack of access to proper care. In Uganda, the average girl will miss 1 to 3 days of school a month due to her period. In the Karamoja region of Uganda, menstruating girls spend their days sitting on mounds of sand and putting rocks and banana leaves in their underwear as their schools don't provide proper hygiene facilities. Only 57% of girls will complete primary education. There are many reasons for this, but lack of menstrual care plays a large role. More often than not, early marriage occurs when young girls drop out of school, as it seems the most feasible option in taking care of their periods.
After hearing all of these heartbreaking statistics and stories, we ask the question, what product combats the issue of access, hygiene, and expense? The answer is a menstrual cup. It is a silicone cup that is inserted into the vagina and collects blood. It can be worn for up to 12 hours and is reusable for up to 10 years. It is very rare for toxic shock syndrome to occur due to the absence of chemicals. As mentioned before, disposable period products are quite expensive. And although the menstrual cup may be pricier on the shelf, it is much more economical in the long run. One cup usually costs around $20 to $40, which is equivalent to 2 months' worth of tampons.
When we think of how to be more environmentally conscious, menstrual products don't really come to mind. However, they are much more unsustainable than one might think. Annually, over 45 billion period products are thrown away. The average menstruator uses about 11,000 products in their lifetime. If you took 11,000 pads and lined them up, that would equal 26 Big Bens just for one person. On average, the box of 12 pads is equivalent to 4 plastic carrier bags. It has been estimated that it takes one pad 500 years to biodegrade. 700,000 panty liners, 2.5 million pads, and 1.4 million tampons are flushed down the toilet every day.
We recognize that this was the product we were looking for. It's sustainable, cost-effective, and better for the body. Cups were going to be a key aspect of our project, as we thought they would make the most impact. However, we wanted to make sure everybody felt this way and was comfortable being introduced to a new product. We learned that some girls worried that the cup would take away their virginity, so we faced some resistance early on.
We handed out a few menstrual cups to the local faculty at school and expressed to them that using a cup did not make them any less pure. We were surprised to receive overwhelmingly positive feedback to the product. We were eager to spread our message and make cups more accessible to menstruators on Bali. We had a pre-existing connection to a menstrual cup distributor and reached out to express the prospect of ordering 500. We wanted to distribute the cups to local schools and women's organizations on the island. So as we waited for the cups to arrive, we made these connections. So we waited, and we waited, and we waited a little longer. We had a few obstacles, whether that was customs, shipping locations, or a pandemic. We finally got them in our hands, but by that time, social distancing orders had been put into place, and schools had shut down. We had to adapt to these new circumstances. And like we say in the Bamboo Cathedral, bend like bamboo.
We were still able to hand out 500 cups through the Kim Women's Center and Bhumi Sehat. The Kim Women's Center is a female empowerment organization created by Ibu Sari that provides job training and support programs to Balinese women. Most importantly, it gives divorced women a safe haven, as they are ostracized from their community and not given the same rights as a man. Bume Sehat is a non-profit birth center founded by Ibu Robin Lim that provides natural birthing support to both local and international pregnant mothers in Bali. We chose these organizations because they represent our core values of unity, equality, and impact. They are the vocal and progressive advocates for women's rights in Bali, and we are confident knowing that the cups are in the right hands. Although we are disheartened that we weren't able to hand out the cups personally, we are happy with the impact that we've made in the current state of affairs. Since we weren't able to present our project to the women, we designed education pamphlets in Bahasa Indonesian to explain the cups, how to use them, and their purpose. Each cup comes with its own pamphlet and a small bag.
In Bali, the majority of menstruators use pads, and if you remember, we stated that one box is equal to 4 plastic bags. So, we did the math, and it turns out that if 500 people start using cups, 960,000 plastic bags will be eradicated. Who knew that by transitioning to a different product, one person can save up to 1,920 plastic bags just in their lifetime?
This information is hard to ignore. We obviously couldn't. Throughout this journey, we have ended up in unexpected places and met surprising faces. Yet the whole time, we felt so empowered because we wanted to be the role model our younger selves wish we had.
Our incentive for this adventure was the hope that the next time a girl gets her period, she can say, "Once upon a time, I got my period, and I have this newfound superpower that gives life and will not stay blissfully ignorant."
And I am part of this new, not-so-secret club. And the first rule is to tell everybody.
And that's the bloody truth. Period. Thank you.
We did it! Oh, my legs. Ow.
Great job. So confident.
That was intense.
My legs hurt so badly.
Today's story is about a little girl. This little girl was born on this beautiful French island, twice as small as Bali, called Rainian Island. Surrounded by salty waters and pretty flowers, there you'll find people from all nationalities, all colors, and all religions, united as one. There you'll find bright green mountains and light fountains. This little girl is a fish girl. She has a deep connection with the ocean. She started swimming at 4 months old. There in the blue, she feels brand new. But this little girl isn't so little anymore. And yes, she's standing right in front of you today. Now I'm taller and older, but on the inside, I'm still just a little girl. Like most of you, I have a best friend, and her name is Chloe. Like me, she loves the sea. She really is wonderful and has such a positive soul. She brings the good in me, and that's rare because I tend to see darkness in my happiness. But that was before meeting Chloe. My mother told me once that people spend their lifetime looking for their soulmate, and some never find them. Have you found yours? Well, I have, and her name is Chloe. She was there for me, and I was there for her. We never had big fights, because we knew that life was way too short. We didn't care about anything, or about what people thought. because we were happy. Even though we were 2 days and 5 hours away from each other by plane, we didn't care. The distance can't separate us because our friendship is indestructible. Before I leave for Bali, we used to spend hours every day and every night watching sunsets and sunrise. Chloe loves sunset, so we never miss once. Not once. Chloe and I are both children of the ocean. We were raised by it and we learned from it. Chloe's family name means whale in French, so she's my blue whale and I'm her little fish. Chloe had planned on coming to Bali for my graduation. We talked about it for so long, and then after Bali we would go all around the world together. On the night of the 24th of February, we had planned on calling, but like usual, I fell asleep. She called me 3 times, left me 2 vocals and 14 messages. Sadly, I only saw them the day after at 4 p.m. I had this call, and then I had this fall. Last night we were both asleep, but this morning only one of us woke up. And this day I learned that my best friend died. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. I tried to cry, but my tears were gone. I tried to breathe, but the air was gone. I tried to call for help, but nothing helped. She was gone. And this day, I learned that a part of me was gone too. I ran away. Death was an old friend of mine. I knew him since I was 12 years old. He took my first dog, Gala. I cried for days and I couldn't eat. She was my first loss. Then, when I was 14, I lost Elio, my dear friend and ex-boyfriend. He was my crush when I was just a little girl. Losing him was very difficult for the entire school, but at least we all had each other. Then, when I was 16, I lost my aunt. She's now just a childhood memory. I thought that death was done with me. But life isn't fair, nor a fairy tale. Even though I knew that, I never thought that life could be so cruel. I thought after all I've been through, I could go through anything. I thought I was indestructible. Oh boy, I was wrong. I lost a lot through the years, but losing Chloe was the hardest thing I went through. I felt this dreadful pain inside my heart, a pain so intense it cut my breath. Nothing mattered. Death didn't scare me anymore. I thought about it multiple times. What's the point of living if life takes everything you have away from you? I am weak and I don't want to be strong, because being strong means living without her. I called her, I wrote to her, but she never answered. I wanted to escape reality because this world was too ugly, so I watched a lot of sad, depressing movies. No one came to my rescue. I guess I didn't talk about it enough. I didn't show my tears enough. I didn't scream loud enough. So no one heard my pain, and I'm the only one to blame. Some people told me being surrounded helped. So, like a good little girl, I went out with some friends. Some people told me you have to talk about it. So, like a good little girl, I told my feelings to people I didn't even know. I was a mess, a real ticking bomb, but no one knew. Because like a good little girl, I hide my feelings behind a pretty smile. For weeks I couldn't sleep. Then I fell into an eating disorder I won't share with you the horrible detail of what bulimia nervosa is. But in a few words, it is an eating disorder characterized by binge eating, followed by verging, according to National Eating Disorder Association. Bulimia nervosa is an old friend of mine. And like death, those friends never go away. They just come back at night. I didn't ask for help because I was ashamed of myself. I was disgusted by myself. I couldn't even look at myself. I just felt like I deserved it. I never really could deal with grief until I went back on my island, because I never had the opportunity to be at her funeral. I never had the chance to say my goodbyes. After a while, I decided to move my ass, like Chloe used to tell me, and finally stop saying why me and understand that it is not only me or about me. I read a lot of books about grief, watched a lot of TED Talks about grief, and through those, I understood more about my own experience and about the steps that people and animals take. Because yes, animals do grieve. Elephants, for example, bury the bodies they find on their way with branches, rocks, and mud. Some even carry a bone with them through their journey with the grief. I read this beautiful story of a woman who fell asleep under a tree. When she woke up, an elephant was putting branches all over her body. She was so scared due to the gigantic size of the animal that she couldn't move. And she waited until the elephant was gone. But what she didn't realize is that getting out of an elephant grave is impossible. She started screaming and panicking. She thought she was gonna die. Thankfully, someone heard her and helped her. She is now alive to tell her story. We all grieve, but we all go through the loss differently. Through my research, I learned a new term called persistent complex. In simple words, it means complicated grief. During grief, we all go through steps. Those are: accept the reality of loss, allow the pain, adjust to this new life with the loss, and allow yourself to have other relations. I call them the 4 A's. I read that if you do not go through those steps after only a year, you never will, and therefore developed a complicated grief. But what is complicated grief? Well, it simply means that the feeling of grief does not ease through time. It almost becomes like an addiction, and like any other addiction, it is very dangerous and unhealthy. People socially isolate themselves. Some fall into drugs to fall asleep or to relieve the pain, and others attempt suicide, according to Mental Health Daily. And this happens when people ignore the loss, want to erase it, or just don't want to deal with it. I read a lot about those steps, and I realized that you can't tell someone to go through those steps like a robot. Do this and then do that. No, we don't work like that. We are more complicated than that, and we are all so different. So how could we help people deal with grief? Well, most people don't. They don't teach you at school, and some families don't talk about it because it is taboo or too sensitive of a topic. When I lost Chloe, I was devastated. I never thought I could get over it, because this loss didn't feel like any other of my losses. I was angry at the system and at school because society didn't help me, and school didn't teach me or prepare me for my grief. I was lost in this big, vast, dark ocean of emotions. School teach you about math, grammar, science, history, geography over and over, but those won't help you in your daily life. So I asked myself, how could I help people with grief? And who should I start with? Adults, teenagers, kids? Well, why not start with the younger generation? They are the future after all. But how could I tell a little kid this very delicate and sensitive story of mine? Well, what did I most love when I was just a little girl? Bedtime stories, of course. Every kid on earth loves stories to expand their imagination and learn from them. So, I decided to create and design my very own storybook. The book is for 7 to 10 years old children, but even adults and teenagers can learn from it. The book gives hope to children and helps them see grief as a friend rather than an enemy. I am now going to read to you one of my favorite parts of the book. Well, Oli, everyone will die one day, said Grandpa in a deep, clear voice. It is what makes life so precious. Life is followed by death, and death brings new life. But it doesn't mean that the people we love are not here anymore. They will always be in your heart. They will always live inside of you, through your stories and through your memories. This is why when someone dies, you must keep talking about them to keep them alive. I hope to put this book into the library of Green School, and maybe into the libraries of every school in the world. Losing someone will be and is hard for everyone. But remember that you're not alone. During this very difficult journey of mine, I had lots of help from different psychologists, and through my family and friends' support, I was able to move with the grief. Right now, as I'm talking to you, Chloe and the grief are with me, and I hope they always will be. Because thanks to the grief, I am now a better version of myself, and I am now able to see the positive sides in life, like Chloe used to do. Thank you for listening to this little girl story, and remember that this could be your story too.
If my tears could speak, this is what they would say to you. That I love deeply, that I have had heartaches, and that I have felt deadening pain. My tears, no matter how many times it spilled in the lonely corners of my heart, always yearned for love and the warmth of comforting hugs. But that was then. Today I am happy because music saved me. At the age of 12, I was diagnosed with severe depression. A high level of anxiety and uncertainty took a toll on my everyday life. I became helpless, unable to sink my teeth into anything, even the things I loved. My family, friends, books, art, everything started losing its fun and flavor. I felt as if I was in a car with no control over the steering wheel. I just watched and waited, hoping something or someone would arrive to reset the button of my life. But sadly, the destruction kept growing, and it turned to something that took a huge toll on me. I started hurting my body. I did not know then, but I do know now that self-harm is a coping mechanism. It was a way to have control over emotional pain, and I wanted to be in control over something that was happening to me. By inflicting physical pain on my body, I could distract my mind from all the noise and chatter. So I would hurt myself, climb under the covers, and wait for everything to be absolutely silent. I used to think of my scars as ugly. I used to be ashamed of my actions. But today it is a reminder that I am strong and I can get through anything. I lost my love for music. I couldn't bring myself to deal with any more noise that I knew wasn't going to help me. I did many months of therapy and medication. I was prescribed antidepressants, but I felt no different. In fact, the empty feeling became deeper, something quite frightening for a 13-year-old. One night, I was tired of life kicking the shit out of me. I thought there was no solution to gaining any happiness. I felt as if I was a burden on those around me. I was being sucked down this black hole with no escape. I found 4 packets of Panadol, which is about 40 pills, and I chugged them down without a second thought. It was one of the scariest moments of my life because I knew I was going to die. So I lay down, closed my eyes, and waited. But luckily, my body rejected the pills and I was taken to hospital. I was mad at the world for not taking me to a place of silence. But later on, I realized that it was a wake-up call. The night I was saved, something changed inside me. I committed deep inside my heart to change and resurrect my life. And this began my journey, leaving Bombay for Bali with my mother. I was excited. I was ready to leave my past behind and hopefully be happy. It was going to be a chance to reinvent myself. Once I moved to Bali and joined Green School, I met the most amazing human being, a music therapist, Lindsay Wise. She was kind, engaged, and loved music. I had long forgotten my love for music, and she brought it back in just a few sessions. The way she taught music, she allowed me to embrace my pain. She played all kinds of instruments from shamanic to classical, which helped me cope with my feelings. She sang songs that resonated in my soul. She lit incense and Palo Santo around me, chanted for me, and strummed the guitar while she spoke or sang about self-love, self-care, or self-respect. She made me believe in the healing power of music, something I had never known in my life. She created a safe space, allowing me to unravel my emotions through music. We sang, talked, and cried together. However difficult, I was freely expressing my feelings to her. The sacredness of music paved the way for catharsis and then healing. Since I can remember, music transported me into a space full of love and warmth. And lyrics of most of the music I listened to portray such beauty. I realized music was a dynamic way to express emotions and aspirations. Music helped me to really feel, allowing me to open my eyes to unspeakable joy, to convey deep thoughts without conversation. For example, one of my favorite pieces of classical music is Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. Every time I listen to it, I end up in tears, crying at these beautiful phrases that cannot be molded into words. Over time, I found my passion for music. I rekindled my love for singing. Today, when I sing, I am transported to a place of complete bliss. I was so grateful to sing songs by these incredible artists who put together these lyrics that spoke to me, that showed me that my feelings are justified, they are real, and they can exist. This was the biggest inspiration for me to write my own lyrics, so that other people got a chance to connect with my words and be transported to a state of happiness and comfort. My journey with songwriting all started with poetry. I loved using words to tell a story, to hint at emotions. Then I transformed those words into lyrics while playing chords on a piano. I found my voice, a platform to express rather than suppress my emotions. So, now let's get professional and talk about music therapy. Music therapy is the use of music to address the physical, emotional, cognitive, and social needs of a group or individual. It employs a variety of activities, such as listening to melodies, playing an instrument, drumming, writing songs, and guided imagery. As humans, we create ways of coping through trauma, whether they are healthy or destructive. It's a way of bringing you out of a space of negativity. Healthy coping mechanisms like expressing pain through art allows you to portray your emotions without conversation. Talking to someone can help with the burden of holding in pain, and crying can be a healthy emotional release. All these are natural and helpful ways of allowing you to go through your journey of releasing pain. Harmful coping mechanisms can be ways to either feel your emotions physically, forget, or numb your mind. These methods include various addictions such as drugs, alcohol, sex, or self-harm, cutting, eating disorders, impact with objects. This stems off of control, to be able to feel dominant in an aspect of what is happening to you. And this began my dream of healing others through music. When brainstorming ideas for Greenstone, in the beginning I was at a loss for inspiring ideas, but I told myself, be patient, it will come to you. I knew, deep in my heart, that I had to give something amazing to my school community, as a tribute to a place that gave me so much knowledge, wisdom, and vision. So, finally, one day, Bali magic happened and I hit on an idea. For my Greenstone project, I created an EP, which is a mini music album. Through music, I wanted to focus on the whirlwind we, us as teenagers, go through almost every day. Mood swings, depression even, body issues, bullying. So I interviewed around 15 to 20 high school students and asked them questions on their journey through whatever pain and happiness they have faced as high schoolers. I asked them simple and truthful questions. How do they express their happiness? What does love mean to them? How does pain manifest in their lives? What are their worries and their concerns? What coping mechanisms do you have? I collected all their answers and used them as inspiration for writing my lyrics. This is my EP cover. It's called If My Tears Could Speak, which will be out on June 25th, hopefully. It will be uploaded on Spotify and Apple Music. My journey of creating my EP had its thrilling highs and downright lows. When COVID-19 struck, I was gutted, miserable, because the recording studios shut down indefinitely. And that meant my project came to a grinding halt. To top this, I hit the infamous writer's block, and I was swept away with anxiety. I tried to shake myself out of it by being around musicians, visiting friends whom I find great comfort, but nothing helped. I felt utterly lost. It took a whole month for me to get out of this funk. After a month, a couple of studios reopened and I was thrilled. I met music producers who were encouraging and ready to work with me, and that brought my inspiration back. I focused on my lyrics. I put my heart and soul in it. I finally felt I was on the right track and excited to complete my project. I want to thank my family, friends, and teachers for supporting me through this journey. Before I leave the stage, I will be performing one of my original songs to you. It's called Misfits. Popping pills like candied peppermints, promise that you'll stay with me. Fill my stomach with bleach white cotton. We'll have to keep this quiet. Her small faded as time flew by, the light wore out in her eyes. I can barely catch my breath. Tell me what I can do instead. Sexy love for misfits, exchanging love for innocence. I dozed to the sound of you weeping. to God. You're just sleeping a sexy love for misfits. Is the reason why I can't cry. All of my tears have been left to dry. Tell me what I can change. Nothing will ever be the same. A sexy love for misfits. Exchanging love for innocence. I dose to sound of you weeping. Hope to God you're just sleeping a sexy love for misfits. You tell me that you love me, but I know that it's just a game. Always spitting lies. Do you have anything else to say?